Yeah. Good afternoon, fellow Agustinos, and welcome to the first online alternative class for this second semester. As we continue, of course, sa paghinigyo kapag kinasadya sa aton University Week 2021 paghinisa. To begin with, let us bow our heads and put ourselves in the presence of the Lord. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. God of praise and glory, as we approach these days of coming together virtually to this alternative class, favor us with your presence. Pour out your Holy Spirit to bless, to cleanse our hearts and minds, to open our spirits to the unseen possibilities before us. Guide us of our each delegates to seek to understand one another with humility and care. Make us passionate for your kingdom and your vision of what the world can be. Renew us as a church in our mission to make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. In Jesus' name, amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Again, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our alternative class for the College of Health and Allied Medical Professionals entitled Istorya sa Bakuna, the Medical Perspective of Vaccination and Its Importance in Public Health. I'm your today's moderator, Bea Janine from the USA Student Government, Vice President Internal, and of course, a proud student of the home of the champions, College of Health and Allied Medical Profession, Nutrition Dietetics Department. So before we start, I'd like to acknowledge our partner organizations for this event. Of course, we have the Nursing Student Council, Junior Philippine Pharmacists Association, Apothecarian Council, Junior Association of Medical Laboratory Scientists, and of course, Nutrition Dietetics Council. So before we start, we also acknowledge our online viewers, no? So, kamusta ka mo dira from your screens? And I hope you will enjoy the events that we prepared for you this week, no? And of course, okay, of course, as well, stay tuned because later on we're giving loads of amazing prizes to those who can answer questions for each speaker. So now allow me to present our first speaker for this conference. Okay. So our first guest, so our first speaker is an industrial pharmacist. Okay, so for our first speaker, he's an industrial pharmacist with more than 20 years working experience in the pharmaceutical, consumer healthcare, and medical device industry. Specialized knowledge in pharmaceutical development, process validation, auditing, and quality assurance of pharmaceutical and medical device in accordance with FDA, MHRA, TGA, ICH, ISO, ASEAN, and World Health Organization regulations and guidelines. Let us all welcome Mr. Carlo L. Perete. Hello, sir. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir. We can hear you.
Okay. Let me share my screen first. Okay. I cannot share my screen. So David, will you be the one sharing my screen for today's presentation? Hello?
Hello, sir.
Yes, I'm trying to share my screen, but it looks like I'm not allowed to do that.
Okay, sir, we're just fixing it lang po. Just wait for a moment. Thank you. Okay.
Okay, can you see my screen now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me to be one of your speakers for this afternoon's event. A lot of people, knowing that I am a pharmacist by profession, have been asking me what I do think about the vaccines we now have available on the market. In fact, my neighbors were asking me recently that for them to have confidence on these vaccines, they wanted me to be seen in public being vaccinated before they take the vaccines. So yeah, thank you for inviting me for today's event. And what I can say really, if I will put it in one phrase, my acceptance of the vaccine, I would say vaccines rock. So listen carefully to this short introduction and overview of vaccine development, manufacturing, and distribution. And I'll tell you at the end of the presentation whether you think that vaccines really rock. Okay, So if I will encapsulate into two phrases why there is a bit of a hesitancy in vaccines by most Filipinos. In fact, there was a recent survey by the SWS that almost half of adult Filipinos nowadays still don't want or are unwilling to get vaccinated versus the COVID-19 vaccines. And there are two things that I think contributes to this hesitancy. Number one, I will call it fake news. And the other one, I will call fake drugs. Let me first elaborate on what I learned about fake news and how it impacts vaccine hesitancy. If you recall, last year, the then US president was talking about hydroxychloroquine and how it is effective against COVID-19 vaccines, despite the US chief of the Center for Disease Control saying that there's really no clinical trials that proves that the hydrochloroquine is effective. And just recently, if you've been listening to the news locally, in fact, last week, the media and even the social media is abuzz with ivermectin. And a lot of politicians and sadly some doctors are even advocating that ivermectin can be used as a prophylaxis for COVID-19. Despite the fact that the regulators like the FDA, the World Health Organization, and even the own manufacturer of the drug, Merck, is saying that there is really not enough evidence yet to prove that ivermectin works. And when the vaccines were early rolled out, it was even said that Bill Gates implanted some microchips on the vaccines to monitor the people's activity, which is absurd. And there are news that because these are new technology, mRNA vaccines, this can alter the genetic makeup of the patient. These are all fake news. And just recently, a lot of people are saying that, well, the vaccines are really not safe. It already killed several people. In fact, even Bill Gates was saying that it will kill 700,000 people. I don't know where they got the figure from and how statisticians can predict such outcome. But yeah, all of these are fake news, which contributes to vaccine hesitancy. The other, of course, these are real news, and this has something to do with counterfeit or fake drugs. So just 3 months ago, during a raid in Binondo, Manila, uh, fake or counterfeit vaccines were seized by the authorities. These are dangerous because, counterfeit medicines, they just change the label. It just contains placebo or water. And these are really dangerous for patients. And you can even consider as fake vaccines, those vaccines that are not yet registered by our FDA. And sadly, there was news last year that the Presidential Security Group got hold of a Sinopharm vaccines, which were not yet authorized at that time by the regulators or FDA. So again, there are two things that contribute to vaccine hesitancy: fake news and fake or counterfeit drugs. Now, allow me to state my role as a pharmacist. Okay, just recently, to be exact, 3 months ago, I attended the town hall organized by the Department of Health and the Philippine Pharmaceutical Association. And we were told in that town hall, together with other healthcare professionals like the doctors and the nurses, the med techs, that we as healthcare professionals have a role in ensuring that the public is properly educated about vaccines. This will hopefully solve vaccine hesitancy and increase the amount of people or the number of people who are now willing to get vaccinated. As we know, we have to reach that critical mass or the percentage of the population has to be vaccinated to achieve herd immunity. So, as pharmacists, we are involved in the product life cycle. Apologies, I'm hearing some background noise. Okay, thank you. So sorry. So as pharmacists, we are involved in product life cycle, starting from the development, manufacturing, testing, even the storage and distribution of vaccine until it is distributed to the pharmacy and it's used in the vaccination program or the dispensing of the vaccines. And this will outline my talk for this afternoon. I will discuss as an industrial pharmacist the point of view from the pharmaceutical industry and from the drug regulators on the process of development, manufacturing, testing, and distribution of vaccines. And at the end of my presentation, hopefully you are convinced of the safety and efficacy of these vaccines. Okay, let's first talk about vaccine development. And this particular slide was presented by Dr. Eric Domingo, the chief of Philippines FDA, during that town hall with the pharmacists. Okay, you can see here the process for development of new drugs and vaccines, which is actually a very long process. The batting average prior to the COVID-19 pandemic is it takes the big pharma 10 to 15 years before a drug can be developed from the molecule itself until the approval process of the FDA and before it can be used by the patient. So over the course of this development, we are familiar, of course, with clinical trials. There are 3 phases, phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3, which ensures that these drugs and vaccines are safe and effective before the governments, particularly the FDA, approves this for the use of the general population. That's why I'm a bit surprised with the ivermectin, this particular anti-malaria drug, as you know, that is being peddled by politicians and sadly some groups of doctors, because they are saying that, well, there are trials or studies that have been done already. So my question is, did it follow the mandated requirement for clinical trials? For instance, let's look at the phase 3 trial. You should enroll 300 to 3,000 patients or volunteers with the COVID-19 disease. And then you will have to do a double-blind placebo study to make sure that indeed it is safe and effective. Probably that is why I've heard from the news just yesterday that the FDA granted a compassionate use authorization for one hospital in Manila. Probably this is on the context of doing clinical trials on the ivermectin. Okay, but this goes without saying that even if the COVID-19 vaccines, you can see tremendous acceleration, probably with the help of all sectors, that the development process was cut from 10 to 15 years to just 1 year. Okay, but this goes without saying that there was no shortcut done on the clinical trials before these vaccines are made available to the public. Then, so let's have a look at this diagram, and I will discuss, to make this easier, the 3 COVID-19 vaccines that are now authorized by the FDA for use in the Philippines. So as you know, we have the Sinovac vaccine, which was the first vaccine granted by the FDA with authorization. And then we have the AstraZeneca vaccine and the Pfizer and Moderna vaccine. Okay, so first, the Sinovac vaccine is what you call a virus vaccine. Okay, so you look at the diagram on the top left. Hello. Sorry, can you please unmute your mic? Hello. Thank you. Apologies, I'm still hearing background noise. Okay. So in the case of the Sinovac vaccine, as what I was mentioning earlier, it's the oldest technology. We call them the virus vaccine. This is actually the SARS-CoV-2 virus, which have been inactivated and then put in the vial, okay, before it's injected to elicit the immune response to the patient, okay. And then we have the AstraZeneca vaccine, which belongs to the group called the viral vector vaccine. So the AstraZeneca vaccine, we were told, came from the chimpanzee adenovirus, whereby through recombinant DNA technology, a gene responsible for the production of the spike protein um, was altered and injected into the adenovirus, and before it's injected into the human body as a vaccine. And in that way, the spike protein will attract that's the antigen which will elicit the immune response of the body. So that's your viral vector vaccine. Now, the newest technology is called the nucleic acid vaccines. In fact, I was checking some of the pharmacy books on dosage forms and pharmaceutical technology. This is still not in there precisely because this is the newest technology of vaccine as we know it. So in this case, the mRNA, which is responsible for translating into proteins in the body, is directly injected into the body as vaccine. And the carrier used in this case was a lipid nanoparticle developed by pharmaceutical scientists. This is why one of the main disadvantage of nucleic acid vaccines, like the Pfizer Moderna mRNA, is this is easily inactivated. So you need sub-zero temperatures, -70, for the stability to be maintained. So that is your nucleic acid vaccines. Now, so there are regulations which governs the pharmaceutical and vaccine development. And we know about this as good clinical practice, or GCP. My wife, who is also a pharmacist, works as a clinical research manager. And in the current work from home setup, I always hear these terms like the institutional review board, the independent ethics committee, you have informed consent of the trial subjects, and you have to have careful scrutiny of the data and records that goes into the clinical trials. So all of these are strictly implemented by the pharmaceutical and biopharmaceutical companies when they do clinical trial design. And together with the pharmaceutical and biotech industry, of course, you have the regulators, the FDA, which have their own independent ethics committee that reviews all the information submitted, the clinical trial data, before a drug product, and in this case, a vaccine is approved. This diagram on the right of the screen, this was presented by Dr. Eric Domingo when he was asked about the EUA registration process. So as we know, the FDA granted emergency use authorization already on the vaccines, particularly the Sinovac and AstraZeneca vaccine. But this goes without saying that this undergoes a strict requirements to ensure that good clinical practice is adhered to ensure that all the data submitted pass the scrutiny of independent scientists and experts before these drugs and vaccines are allowed to be used by the general public. Okay, so again, this is saying that the pharmaceutical industry particularly the clinical trial, those involved in clinical trials, and the regulators are working hand in hand to make sure that you only have the safe and effective vaccines made available to the public. Okay, this is just the regulatory requirements for the development. Okay, now let's go to manufacturing of the vaccine itself. Okay, so this is an example of a biotech manufacturing process flow. Uh, so I'm very much familiar with manufacturing. As mentioned earlier, I've spent more than 2 decades in the pharmaceutical industry. And for the biotech industry, this is the process. So let me explain this in the context of the Sinovac vaccine, the virus vaccine. Okay. So in the case of the oldest technology for vaccine manufacturing, the virus vaccine, you have the vaccine, sorry, not the vaccine, the virus grown in large bioreactors. So we call them the cell culture. So in this case, the virus are grown in chick embryos. Okay. So these are grown in bioreactors, harvested, or what we call the product recovery phase. And then there are a series of purification steps involving chromatographic techniques like size exclusion chromatography to purify the virus or the viral culture, until finally you have the final purified bulk tested in the lab. You have bioassays like the PCR, which tests if there is appropriate titer of the virus in each vial of the vaccine. So this is a very strict process governed by a GMP. So I'm now moving to good manufacturing practice. So as I mentioned, I'm in the introduction earlier, I'm a certified quality auditor. I've been doing quality audits for the pharmaceutical and medical device industry for many years now. And in auditing, we are governed with the WHO GMP guidelines for the manufacturing of medicinal products, including vaccines. Also, the PICS GMP, we call them the PICS, or the Pharmaceutical Inspection Convention Scheme. And there are various regulations across different countries, like this I'm showing on the screen, the China regulations on GMP, the European Union GMP requirements, of course, the US FDA. And just recently, in the last 10 years, the focus for the pharmaceutical and biotech industry is on data integrity. So when we do audit, we look at things like is there accuracy in data there? Do we make sure that there's audit trail? Is the data traceable to a particular person performing the manufacturing process, as an example? So all of these regulations are very much implemented in the biotech industry. So you have pharmacists working as quality assurance professionals, making sure that each and every product released into the market conforms with appropriate standards. In fact, in the European Union, we have in the law, we have what we call as authorized persons, and only pharmacists can be authorized person. They are responsible for each and every product released to the market. So in case a substandard product, product of not of good quality or not conforming with regulations is released, they are amenable to the law. They can be imprisoned, and this has happened in several occasions for the authorized person that releases the drug to the market. Now, as the product is released, of course, it has to be stored and distributed, and we have various distribution centers. Again, the requirement here is to make sure that the supply chain system And you are seeing here on the screen the complexity of the supply chain system, from the supplier of the raw materials and packaging materials to the manufacturer to government institutions like the Bureau of Customs, and the FDA, and even the pharmacy in the pharmacy retail store. Everyone works hand in hand to make sure that cold chain management is retained. Okay, so you can see here on the picture, a cold chain warehouse where you have vaccines stored in sub-zero conditions. And speaking of supply chain, even when you distribute this to the market, you make sure that you have refrigerated trailer or refrigerated trucks, and you have a system to monitor the temperature if there are any excursion. We know this to be the mean kinetic temperature. So you have a cumulative representation here of, let's say this is AstraZeneca vaccine. And we know from literature that AstraZeneca vaccine should be stored from 2 to 8 degrees. Okay. In case there are temperature excursions, this has to be investigated. That is because even during the drug distribution or vaccine distribution, this is governed by the law on good distribution practice. So I'm showing you here on the screen the WHO Good Distribution Practice Guideline for pharmaceutical products, including vaccines. And there are various regulations across different countries, which effectively checks on how you ship the product, how you import, how's your inventory control, how's your cold chain or temperature control management. Okay. In case there are problems with cold chain or temperature management, proper investigation has to be conducted in accordance with the guidelines on good distribution practice. This reminds me of the recent news I've heard that some of the vaccines, I think these were AstraZeneca vaccines, delivered to the Bicol region, was returned by the LGU to the DOH central office because apparently the temperature recorder is not working. But then I heard the DOH saying that the vaccines are effective. What is lacking in this case is there has to be a thorough investigation, understanding the root cause, understanding the impact to the stability of the product, whether really the product is still deemed safe and effective after it has been exposed to excursions and the requisite temperature requirement. Okay, so pharmacists again can help out in ensuring that these investigations are properly carried out in accordance with the WHO Good Distribution Practice Guidelines. Then finally, we have the vaccination program. And again, there is the guideline for the pharmaceutical industry on pharmacovigilance, where it is required to report any adverse events to the company itself, to the manufacturer, and to the regulators. Why do we need to report to the company? Well, if there are adverse events, this helps in the data or the body of information, which could be used in probably a redesign of the drug or the vaccine in the future. And with the regulators, you are required to report the adverse event because this is a public health concern. So you can put warning, for instance, in the label instructions of the vaccine that because of the adverse event for people 60 years old and above, this particular type of vaccine cannot be administered to this group of individuals or patients. So even in the distribution and the administration of the vaccines, you have regulations in place to make sure that the adverse events is monitored and to make sure that there is a look back mechanism to pharmaceutical development, to the vaccine development, whether the adverse event warrants for a redesign of the vaccine, or whether it warrants precaution to be put in the labels, for instance, the vaccine inserts, that this particular patient group should be wary of getting this type of vaccine. Okay. So there is also a requirement, you can see here at the bottom of your screen, to report on any counterfeit drugs and medicines. Uh, because of social media, it's now easy to get hold of reports on counterfeits. But back in the day, what I can remember is, um, in case there are reported counterfeits by the company, you have a group of investigators really checking on all the documentations to make sure that the counterfeit uh, drug is removed from the market and the root cause is properly investigated, and those amenable under the law should be fined or um, probably slapped with a license to operate is revoked. And you have the police power of the FDA. They can do that in case of counterfeit manufacturers being reported to them. So what are we saying here? Okay, so you have seen the product life cycle from the vaccine development, manufacturing, storage, and distribution until this is used in the vaccination program. And hopefully, I've also discussed the various regulations, starting from good clinical practice, good manufacturing practice, good distribution practice, including the pharmacovigilance requirement. All of these are put in place to make sure that public health is safeguarded. So I must say, we should trust the process. Vaccines work because the pharmaceutical developer and manufacturer did its job. Vaccines work because the regulators and the quality assurance professionals in the pharmaceutical industry did their job in ensuring that only good quality products are released to the market. Vaccines work because the healthcare professionals, the pharmacists, the nurses, the medtech, the doctors work hand in hand to make sure that the process is followed. Okay. But then again, as what we say in the industry, quality is perishable. I repeat, quality is perishable. That goes without saying that we should report any illegal activities, like if you get hold of a news that there is a counterfeit vaccines being developed or distributed, you should report to the authorities, because counterfeit vaccines can kill. And lastly, please, please, before sharing that information in your social media, please be aware that fake news, much like fake drugs, can kill. The wrong information, and if the public trusts you, if you're a public figure, the politicians, the artists, if they share information that people believe in, then I would say they can contribute to um, the public being harmed by sharing wrong information about these vaccines. So my final words are: trust the process, the vaccines work, report illegal activities that impact vaccine quality and patient safety, and lastly, beware of fake news. And hopefully, I've convinced you by now that the COVID vaccine really works. So what are you waiting for? Get your vaccines now. Get vaccinated, because vaccines rock. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Carlo, for that insightful presentation. No, so just a few of my takeaways, no, from your presentation. No, you always need to, of course, be alert against fake news and counterfeit drugs, and also, Sir Carlo discussed the processes involved in the making and in the intricate transportation methods and guidelines, of course, required for vaccines to work effectively. Okay. Again, thank you, Sir Carlo. And now let's proceed to our open forum. So you may enter your questions on the chat box, and I will read it afterwards. Any questions from our participants here? Okay, we have a question from Mr. David Corsino, the Apothecarian Council Governor. Okay, allow me to read it, sir. Good afternoon, sir. Some people are having distrust on some of the vaccines because of their low efficacy rate. Should it be used as a basis for deciding whether to get vaccinated or not? Again, some people are having distrust on some of the vaccines because of their low efficacy rate. Should it be used as a basis for deciding whether to get vaccinated or not?
Thank you for that question, David. Indeed, there are various efficacy rates for the vaccines available now in the market for the use of the Filipino public. So as I mentioned, there is the Sinovac vaccines, the AstraZeneca vaccine, and the Pfizer vaccine. The Sinovac vaccines, we were told, have the efficacy rate which is relatively quite low compared to the AstraZeneca and Pfizer vaccines. But the WHO and FDA is saying they're saying that as long as you have this threshold of efficacy, which is if I'm not mistaken, above 60%, then this is safe for the public to be used. Again, I mentioned about adverse event monitoring as part of the regulator's job. They are monitoring also any adverse events that the vaccines have during the vaccination program. So not only the efficacy, but the patient safety is also monitored. So to the short answer to your question is, well, you can get vaccinated with all the vaccines approved by the Philippine FDA. If it's issued an emergency use authorization, that means the panel of experts have already certified that the vaccines can be used. So there should be no doubt lingering in our minds that these vaccines are safe and effective. I hope that answers your question, David.
Of course, thank you so much, David Rishi, for that question. And of course, thank you, Sir Carlo, for that insightful answer. Of course, let me allow to read the certificate of representation. The certificate reads, Certificate of Representation is given to Carlo L. Perete, RPH, MSc, for his meritorious service and participation as speaker during the alternative classes of the University of San Agustin Student Government, Nursing Student Council, Junior Philippine Pharmacists Association, Apothecarian Council, Junior Association of Medical Laboratory Scientists, and Nutrition Dietetics Council, entitled Istorya ng Bakuna, the Medical Perspective of Vaccination and Its Importance in Public Health, that leads to a successful event. Given this 11th day of April in the year 2021, signed Adelmar Javier Jr., USASG President, signed Sonny Sala, USASG Advisor. Again, thank you so much, Sir Carlo, on the pharmacist point of view on vaccine acceptance. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. And now we will be asking you 3 questions through Google Forms. So the first to answer these questions will receive a prize exclusively from USA Student Government. So we'll be sending the questions on the chat box. So watch out for it, guys. So kamusta nga to mga audience na? I hope that you're safe in your respective homes. So, and I hope that you're learning something no, from our speakers for today. So we have 3 more speakers for this afternoon. So ginhawa taan na relax, take a break, and relax at the comfort of your home. Again, watch out for the Google Forms to be sent on the chat box. So we'll give a prize to the first one who will answer our questions correctly. So okay. We will announce the winners after our speakers. So the form is out now, so you may now answer the questions. Again, we will announce the winners after the program. Thank you. Yeah, nursing naga. So now allow me to present our second speaker for this event. Okay, but before that, we have 2 more questions now, so watch out, guys. So it will be sent on the chat, but now the second question is up, so we now answer it. So good luck, guys. No, we have a Gcash prize now, and we will announce the winners after the program. Okay, the third question is up now, guys. The second. Okay, participants, thank you for answering the question. Now, again, we'll announce the winners after the program. So now let's proceed to our second speaker. So allow me to present the second speaker for this event. She's currently a professional lecturer at the College of Medicine, West Visayas State University since 2015, former dean of the College of Pharmacy and Medical Technology, a member of the Regional Quality Assurance Team. She was assistant professor and clinical instructor of the University of San Agustin, reviewer, medical technologist licensure examination, vice chair for health and safety committee of University of San Agustin. She graduated from University of San Agustin, taking up Bachelor of Science in Medical Technology, and she has a master's degree in Public Health from University of the Philippines, College of Public Health, Manila. Let us all welcome our second speaker for this afternoon, Mrs. Lerma Paris. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Hello, Bea, finally.
Yes, you finally meet, ma'am. Good afternoon.
Yeah, so I was able to come up with a presentation as you expected after having some confusion. But anyhow, can you see my slides now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. So the topic given to me, I will be wearing a hat as public health advocate at this particular hour for the lecture. Topic given to me is vaccine acceptability. In fact, the focus was supposed to be on a nursing point of view, but I'd rather discuss the topic from the point of view of the healthcare professionals or the healthcare team, with emphasis on the nursing team, of course, as requested. So, vaccine acceptability is more than just a medical perspective. Vaccination, I will not define it as a very technical term. Rather, I'll be trying to describe it as an aspect in terms of public health appreciation. So the what, the why, and the how. What is vaccination? Vaccination is for everyone to appreciate. The pinaka endpoint is for us to be able to prevent and control infectious diseases. So to give the community, the person protection, so that we prevent and control transmission of infectious diseases where and when they are applicable. Why is there a need for vaccination? So these questions you need to answer towards the end of this presentation. We have often been hearing of the term herd immunity. So by herd immunity, what we mean is population immunity. So when you talk about public health, you are not just talking about one individual person in terms of clinical practice or clinical medicine. You're talking about the whole of society. So it's an indirect protection from an infectious disease that happens when immunity develops in a population, either by or through the following. One is vaccination, and the others is by previous infection. The World Health Organization supports achieving herd immunity through vaccination over the fact that rather than by allowing a disease to spread through a population by natural cases, by having the disease, and of course, deaths as well. So herd immunity only works for vaccine preventable diseases with an element of person-to-person spread. A very good example for that is what we are currently having as a pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, where transmission is from person to person. Why am I emphasizing this? It's because vaccination is an important factor in the prevention and control of all infectious diseases that are spread by person or from person to person. An important attribute of which is or are those vaccines against poliomyelitis, the rotaviruses, pneumococcus, Haemophilus influenzae type B, yellow fever, meningococcus, and numerous other vaccine preventable diseases. The list is infinite. But how about for the others like tetanus? In the case of tetanus, it's caused by Clostridium tetani. You can find the organism causing the disease in contaminated soil. So even if you vaccinate person to person, that is not transferable to the community or to the society. Why? Because its spread is not from person to person. The transmission is from contaminated soil containing the causative agent to the person. So it doesn't work in that particular case. Now, how is vaccination implemented? Because the Philippines, for example, as a developing country, and considering that we are not that rich compared to the other countries, we try to identify groups that are at risk, especially those that are at higher risk. When we talk about risk groups, no one is not at risk. Everybody's at risk. But we consider who should be prioritized, who are the more vulnerable. In the case of COVID-19, we say they are those of the higher age groups, those with comorbidities, as proven and evidenced by different peer-reviewed reputable studies. So we put in resources where they are most needed, and then eventually have everybody else vaccinated if that would be possible. So targets are set and programs for vaccination are well in place. As mentioned by our first speaker, the work takes different phases and different steps. So it's not that easy. In fact, in our regular condition where there is no pandemic, it will take you years for you to come up with a diagnostic test kit to identify, isolate, and test emerging infectious diseases and their causes. But in this case, for the COVID-19, we have learned that because of the advanced technology that we have now, we were able to come up with diagnostic test kits no less than the very specific PCR test in matter of few months after having identified the causative agent for this particular COVID-19 disease. But it takes a process. Development of vaccines will also take months to years as there are different stages. However, with the emergency use authority or the vaccine technology development that is far advanced, we were able to come up with vaccines sooner than expected. So for vaccine development, the different vaccines underwent testing. In fact, there are still ongoing clinical trials because it takes different trials 1, 2, 3, and prior to the clinical trials, you have the preclinical stage, after which there is a certification and an authorization. So when we talk about vaccines in general, they could be given in oral, injectable, or spray forms. What we will be focusing on is the acceptability of the injectable vaccine specific to the COVID-19, which is more of our concern currently. So ideally, vaccines should be simple, safe, efficient, or effective. So you have the three terms: efficacy, efficiency, effectiveness. How are they the same or how are they different? We will talk about them later. So when we talk about vaccine and their development, we talk about quality assurance, we talk about their safety. Not until we are clear about these things, then acceptability is far away. Now, what do people consider before subjecting to vaccination? What makes them accept, as well as what makes them fear so that they hesitate to accept vaccination? Success of vaccination programs actually depend upon these two important factors. One is acceptance, the other is coverage. So it's not enough that people, especially the healthcare workers, realize the need for the vaccination and accept the fact. It's also important that there is enough coverage for us to be able to arrive at the so-called population immunity or herd immunity. Now, the herd immunity against COVID-19, in fact, is not near for the Philippines. Now, we have a very poor coverage as of now. We expect that for most of the vaccines that are now given the emergency use authorization, most of them are not accessible. In fact, most of them are not accessible to most of us Filipinos. So I don't need to overemphasize the fact that since we cannot afford in terms of production in the locality and in terms of competing with the rest of the world for availability to be able to purchase ahead and in time for our need, then that becomes a big challenge. So this is where the World Health Organization comes in to make sure that countries such as the Philippines and the rest that are relatively poorer than the rest are given equitable opportunity to avail of these vaccines, aside from just those countries that are rich and capable. Now, for us to be able to arrive at an herd immunity we're talking about, specific to each infectious disease is a number, a percentage. In the case of COVID-19, we are not so sure, but literature say it's somewhere between 55 to 82%. There must be 55 minimum to 82% of the population covered by vaccination program for us to arrive at the so-called herd immunity. So for us to be able to influence ourselves, our families, and our communities, to accept vaccine and have themselves vaccinated, we need to make them understand the risks. There is a need to change behavior and attitude towards vaccination by giving them the right information, by building trust and confidence. Though now we are talking about more of the social-cultural factors now beyond what we know by medicine or by research. What surveys say, and I quote, only 19% of adult Filipinos are actually willing to get vaccinated against COVID-19, while 46% are unwilling, even if it is proven safe and effective yung vaccine. That's according to the Octa research as of February of 2021. The enumerated top 3 reasons for vaccine hesitancy are the following. One is that not sure if it is safe. 73% of the interviewed population gave this response, while 29% answered not sure if vaccine is actually effective. What is more remarkable, however, is that 9% said a vaccine is not needed to combat COVID-19. The first two, although they are also significant responses for public health people to address, what is worrisome, even more worrisome, is the third one. People saying that vaccination is actually not needed to combat COVID-19 pandemic. It makes you worry, no? Okay. So fear of the unknown is an issue. It's a big challenge. Knowing the truth, therefore, is very important. So where does the healthcare professionals, the doctors, the nurses, the medical technologists, the pharmacists, the nutritionists, the dietitians, the physical therapists, and all of us, where do we enter? Where do we take on a different role and act different roles? We can be advocates and sources of truth, the right information to be able to influence attitude, behavior, and positive action towards this issue. So what I say is, there's a need for research. There's a need for very good researches published and known to all, if possible, so that we come up with evidence-based and informed decisions. But I tell you, this is not just an issue among the laypersons, those outside of the medical profession. This is even an issue among us healthcare professionals. For whatever reasons, we don't often get 100% acceptability among even the doctors, even the nurses, even the medtechs, and the rest. Why is that so? I will ask you that question later. So for us to tell the truth, we need to understand and appreciate how rigorous, how strict different stages of vaccine development is implemented before it can be given certification or even the EUA. We know for a fact that there are stages. So when you talk about preclinical, just in case you'll be asked, in simple terms, how will you explain that? The preclinical stage of the vaccine preparation is that which is done outside of humans, outside the human trials. This is usually done first or tested in animals. Issue, even for animal inoculation, you talk about ethics, you talk about biosecurity, biosafety, safety of animals, etc. So you need to comply with all the requirements even before you can conduct the preclinical trial. So it takes a process, it takes time. Then after the preclinical trial, there is the clinical trial stage. So here, you involve humans for testing. And we know for a fact, every time humans are involved in whatever experimentation, testing, or research, there are certain guidelines to be followed and complied with. So you have certain ethical boards, ethical committees that take care of this. So you hear of clinical trials trying to convince volunteer participation among the different groups in the hospitals, in the schools, etc. So trial one usually makes use of a few or hundreds or few humans to test the product, while trial two will usually be involving randomized controlled trial. Ibig sabihin, it's now making use of two groups. One group of volunteers will be treated with the vaccine candidate, and the other group will be treated with a placebo. While trial 3, similar to trial 2, will actually be making use of a bigger number of people to get involved so that you have a better say in terms of efficacy or efficiency of the vaccine, because you have a bigger number of participants or volunteers in the testing. So what is being tested during these trials is how well does the vaccine work in both groups, and compare after the trial yung given ng vaccine as against the group not given the vaccine. In terms of how many of those given develop the disease after, no, how many of those not given the vaccine develop the disease thereafter. Then percentages of both groups are compared, and there is a formula how the efficiency or the efficacy percentage is arrived at. So there is a mathematical formula for this, and errors, margin of errors, confidence intervals are expressed likewise. Now, it doesn't end there, because after the clinical trials or human testing, there is also reviews of efficacy, safety, and manufacturing, this time for regulatory and public health policy approvals, before the vaccine may be introduced into the so-called National Immunization Program. And after that, it's followed by different reviews, again, concerning efficacy, safety, and manufacturing, again, for regulatory and public health policy approvals before a vaccine may be introduced into a national immunization program with monitoring. Here in the monitoring, adverse effects or adverse conditions are recorded and further studied or assessed in terms of effectiveness in the routine use setting among larger numbers of people. And so it doesn't end anywhere. There is a continuous process of assessment and monitoring. So now you're using the terms efficacy or efficiency as well as effectiveness. So if we try to look at the different data concerning the different vaccines that are made available now, you will see some timelines, no? Giving you the different stages in their preparation, etc. But because the focus of my talk is not on this, I'd rather skip that and then proceed. So there are several factors in vaccine acceptance, and these factors in terms of hierarchy depend upon which population the study was trying to make a conclusion or conclusion for, or generalization. So factors in vaccine acceptance, first and foremost, will consider always data known by science, knowing the truth by science, okay? So it's important that there is trust and confidence. You trust something you know which is true, and there is confidence in something that is transparent. So when we talk about trust and confidence in terms of governance, in terms of rolling out of these vaccines, the vaccination program, who should be covered and who should be covered first? who should be prioritized and who should be next and who should be last. So these are things. Which vaccine to purchase and why? No, why does it take so long to purchase a vaccine? In fact, even if there is already a budget, etc. So people would want to know, and people would want to dwell into the reasons behind why and how. So here comes other factors, even more difficult to deal with would be the political and the socio-cultural factors that is also or that are also affecting vaccine acceptability and or hesitancy. So the challenges are innumerable, but basically I always go back to fear. You fear of something you don't know a lot about, and that is very true for this current pandemic. And because of this current pandemic, and because of the technology that is available to almost everyone, there is the so-called info pandemic as well. So aside from just knowing the truth, someone has to be concerned with which source to look for to know the truth, whom to call, no? Whom to ask about information about all these things. So because there is the issue and there is the phenomenon, I would even call it also a pandemic of misinformation and fake news. So that is a bigger challenge. Low coverage is a given. I will give you a very good example. After the scare, after the dengue vaccine scare or phenomenon, there was this measles and polio outbreaks in 2019, simply because there was lowered vaccination rates, simply because there was fear, stigma, and fear. So decades of vaccination advocacy programs na pinangabudlayan sa Department of Health, all of a sudden, you start from scratch. So that is beyond medical. It takes more than just medical. So now you have a problem of communicating very important information from those who are in the scientific field as well as those who are in the community, those who are not very knowledgeable about the scientific terms and things, but what is common to all would be something of fear and stigma. So vaccine hesitancy suppresses the desire for newer vaccines, for new innovations, and healthier solutions. So that's a given. Probably you already know that. For COVID-19, we say there is emergency use authorization, as was mentioned by the first speaker. And the process is not that easy. It was not short. There was no shortcut. There is no compromise of safety and efficacy over the urgency of the need. So all of these are taken into important or as significant considerations. Why? Because COVID-19 is new. COVID-19 is an emerging infectious disease. From a public health emergency, it was declared a pandemic last year. Short period of time, no? And when you say pandemic, the problem is worldwide. And when a problem like an infectious disease concerns the globe, the whole of the world, even the rich countries will have to worry about the poor ones. Why? Because even if the rich countries who have very good coverage for their vaccination cannot be successful unless the rest of the world will have the same. Because for as long as you have a source, for as long as there is rapid or exchange of people from place to place, no? There will always be sources of infection. And because the virus, which is your coronavirus, your SARS-CoV-2, is very multi-talented, very versatile. That's why it comes up with a different mask of itself in the form of the different variants. No? So you have to cope with that. We have to cope with that. So the world cannot be complacent We in the medical field cannot just sit down, sitting pretty, if we already have ourselves vaccinated, because we just don't need to protect our personal care. We need to protect our families and our communities. So in the history, you come up with things like factors of integrity. Why do people don't believe you right away? Because there was an experience. There was this thing that happened to a family or to a friend that will make them decide otherwise. So people's behavior in public health is the most difficult thing to change. People will be the most difficult factor to deal with. So you come up with the best vaccine, you come up with the best program, but unless people understand and people appreciate and they do something positive in response to your program, then you cannot do otherwise. So what can we as healthcare workers or healthcare professionals do to help? We need to increase acceptability. We need to decrease significantly hesitancy. So we need to be more focused on giving knowledge, information, knowing the truth, and making them understand. You don't make the people understand by talking or speaking in English over the radio. By writing beautifully crafted, scientifically written manuscripts and having them published in peer-reviewed journals. Because more of the people are in the community, they don't read journals, they don't read papers that are read by scientists or medical professionals, but they listen to what is more accessible to them. So we deliver the message, we do the risk communication through the radio, in the dialect, in the language that they can better understand. Because unless, as I said earlier, unless there is understanding, then you don't expect any change in decision or behavior. So that takes a different kind of skills. Now, how you package an information in such a way that you translate very scientific finding or a scientific program into something that is easily understood and converted into action. Okay, so first we need to identify what are these factors that block the decision towards the positive by evidence-based messaging. Okay, evidence-based messaging, you don't just talk from your own, according to your own opinion. You are or you have the right to your own opinion. But as a public influencer, as a public figure, as a medical professional whom people look up to, especially during this time of the pandemic, it is every medical professional's duty to know the truth, to know the latest, and to try to translate this into something easily that can be easily understood by the patients and their folks. So usually, who are those in close association with the folks in the hospital setting? They are the doctors, they are the nurses, most importantly the nurses, because they are the ones having more critical clinical hours with them. So we need to develop the skills, okay? So since COVID-19 is an emerging infectious disease, a lot of things are unknown about it. Once there is an unknown, there is always fear, okay? So we cannot pretend and tell everybody, it's okay, it's 100% safe. You can say it's safe, these are the findings, these are the bases. However, it is only safe to give the vaccine to those, even those with comorbidities, to those with comorbidities for as long as they are in a stable condition as attested by their physicians or attending doctors, etc. So you always leave a chance for people to decide. No? They still have the free will to decide based on the information that you give them. So you don't keep anything from them. So many of the healthcare workers report that they would want to delay getting the COVID-19 vaccine according to a research letter published online. So it's a given. As the first recipients of the vaccines, their buy-in and participation in the vaccination program are critical. Critical, that's why it will help if people get pictures of you having yourselves vaccinated and having these pictures uploaded for people to see. Oh, si ma'am, no? Oh, si sir, oh, si doc, nagpa-vaccinate gani, nagpa-immunize, no? So people are very visual. People are, especially the Filipinos by culture, the influence of people in hierarchy is very significant. So studies also have shown that among the many factors, physicians first, then nurses next, and then the rest of us in the healthcare professions are the most trusted and influential in the decision making of people around us. So we take it upon ourselves that we show them the confidence, the acceptance of these vaccines that we have among us, and that we give them the correct information, and we tell them the truth all the time, that even if these things are known, there are still those that are unknown. So you don't always say it's 100% safe, because in fact people know 1% out of the 10,000 of the 10 million develop an adverse effect. No, it's the truth. It's the truth. So we always share real-time information, real-time findings from all the researches that we find in reputable sources. I would like to encourage everyone to be an advocate for vaccine acceptability. Personally, I also have my qualms about it. I have my reservations because I have a lot of recall this, of underlying conditions as well. I am hypertensive. Recently, I have exacerbations of my asthma, but in case the vaccine will be made available, and if my doctor will tell me you are in a stable condition now, I will not hesitate. No, I will not hesitate. So I have these reservations, but I try to learn more about these things so that I can make an informed decision based on those evidences. So as an advocate for vaccine acceptability, we focus on the truth. We deliver a clear message so that people will understand and be convinced to take positive action. As Dr. Fauci says, vaccines have crushed previous outbreaks of diseases like smallpox, polio, and measles. But polio is here again, measles is here again because of those drawbacks. Dr. Fauci likewise implies that the ultimate effectiveness of the vaccine will depend on how it is rolled out and received by the general public. These two factors, in fact, we hardly have control over, diba, as medical professionals. This is more of the turf of those people in government. And we know that when we talk about the Philippine government, it's medyo masalimuot. No? There's the political issue that does not end. But on our part, as advocates, we would rather become part of the solution and not add to more confusion. So I would say, as St. Augustine has said, let our searching be such we may be sure of finding, and let our finding be such we may continue on searching. For my final message, there's a lot of fear around us, but there is also a lot of information available for us to study and to take into account. As professionals in the medical field, we need to inform ourselves, inform our families, inform the rest of our community about the good and the need for the vaccine. And unless we do that, then we become part of the many who remain in the background and who remain confused for as long as there is a fake news, there is a misinformation, and there is somebody who is just not doing anything else during the day, but would rather have you have fun over this misinformation that you worry about. So In ending, we raise to God all our worries as we do our share in taking care of his herd. So I'd like to say good afternoon once again. If you have questions, I'll be very willing to address them. Thank you.
Thank you, Ma'am Lerna. So of course, no, through your speech, we were able to know the current image of vaccine accessibility, of course, in our society. It is truly disturbing, no, especially to know that there's this lack of knowledge and trust on our vaccines, right? So trust issue is real gid talaga. And nonetheless, this it is the goal of our talks, no, to improve the situation of our society right now. And once again, thank you for being our one of our speakers. So participants, you may now raise your questions so regarding the topic or and discussion of Ma'am Lerna. Okay, so we have a question from Miss Maria Luxi. So I'll now read her question. According to the report published by CNN Philippines last April 6, 2021, Philippines is expecting to receive 1.5 million doses of Sinovac vaccine from China and Sputnik 5 from Russia's Gamaleya Research Institute this month. What is the difference of Sinovac from Sputnik vaccine in terms of their composition? Again, what is the difference?
Composition?
Yes.
Composition?
What is the difference of Sinovac from Sputnik vaccine in terms of their composition?
Okay. So I'd like to address the question referring to all the vaccines na lang, no? Not just the two. All the vaccines are prepared in such a way that they develop in the body antibodies to fight against the virus, okay? COVID-19 virus. Now, the different vaccines also vary in terms of their efficacy. Kasi the first question that was asked of the first speaker, kanina I was there, no, I was able to listen, to hear it, was what makes a 90% or a higher efficiency different from a lower efficiency? Why will you go for something like that works 50% and not for something that is 95%? We in the medical professions would always say, even the DOH, now part of the program would say, I will take the first vaccine that is made available to me, okay? The reason for this is regardless of the number, okay, 95%, 90%, 70%, all the vaccines given the certification and the approval by FDA can prevent COVID-19 severe to critical disease. In other words, 100% prevention of death. Because most of the infections are mild, others are, asymptomatic, others are mild to moderate. Usually vaccines cannot protect you against, cannot give you total protection against the infection. Diba? Because vaccines, given the percentage of efficacy like 50% or 90%, ibig sabihin ng 90% reduction, you have a 90% reduction in cases of disease in the vaccine group. It does not mean you have 100% protection. Kaya nga, we always emphasize, even if you're given your first shot of the vaccine, you still need to practice minimum health standards because you can still get the vaccine and can transmit that to the others as well, especially pag first dose ka pa lang. Okay? So I would like to, I don't know if I'm answering the question, but when we talk about composition, what is more important for me that causes fear among the listeners would be not the specific differences among the different vaccines, no, between Sputnik and Sinovac, rather what they contain that might cause adverse reactions. Kasi most people would say, I will not take that because it has thimerosal, it has egg egg component that can cause allergies and everything else. Okay, so regardless of what vaccine it is, for as long as it is given an approval by FDA or certification, that will be good enough. That will be good enough.
Okay, ma'am, thank you for answering that question, ma'am. So, and we
Siguro
have,
mo lang eh. Sorry.
yes,
To make
ma'am.
it clear, to make it clear further, you cannot compare one vaccine with the rest. Now, you cannot compare them as if they were prepared all at the same controlled environment, etc. That is why you cannot compare a 90% efficacy of one vaccine with a 50% efficacy of another, because one vaccine may have been tested in the older population, the other one in the younger population. One would be in a country where it is cold and other controlled environment, a different environment compared to the one that is, I mean, the vaccine B. So wala sila point of comparison, no? They are all different. So appreciating the percentage reduction in terms of efficiency, no, would be more important for me rather than focusing just on the number.
Okay, ma'am, thank you for that. No, so everyone, let's all repeat. Be the source of information, not of confusion. So again, well, we have last two questions, ma'am, from our participants. Okay, from Mr. Wency Verdat. Ma'am, last April 5, 2021, Mayor Trenya said that only 59,000 out of 320,000 in Iloilo City registered for vaccination. Is it because the political influential bodies lacks effort in reaching the public, or that the public are just not hesitant or confused despite all of the evidence provided to them?
I'd like to
I
believe, sorry, I'd like to believe it's the second one. It's the second reason. In fact, before the finding of the presence of the variant in the Philippines, our group, no, the public health advocates, composed of the doctors and myself, the public health advocates, would want to go to the barangay level, no, to share information, because there you will be able to accommodate questions and you'll be able to answer directly the concerns of the people in the barangay. Now, I would like to believe it's more of the second than the first. Although there is always that factor of the political thing, no. But I don't think in Iloilo it's a big problem. I don't think so, no. We are doing better compared to the rest, because in the other areas I know they have bigger problems in terms of politics. Here, what we see is a gap in the information. That's why my emphasis is package the information well so that people understand what you're trying to tell them, and then you get them to move towards action. This time it's accepting the vaccine. You know, fear, Bea, you cannot rid of people from fear overnight, over months, especially that we have already been suffering more than a year, no? So may mga mental health issues na kita, patong-patong na siya. So that is our recommendation from start to finish. Even before the first case of COVID in Iloilo last year, we were already trying to address that fear by giving. We were already moving from one school to the next, no, giving information campaign with advocates even before we were locked down, to address the fear, to address the stigma.
Okay, ma'am, thank you for that. And for our last question, from Mr. Debs Alantuson, on educating students about health, especially vaccination.
Sorry, Bae, I did not get that.
Okay, ma'am, for our last question for you, ma'am, on educating students about health, especially vaccination, should the Department of Health be the only body of education on that? In your opinion, should DepEd and SHED help by invoking or revising their curriculums to help battle the misinformation against vaccination?
I'd like to believe that, and that is what we encourage. We don't leave this communication thing, no? Communication thing to just the Department of Health. As I have mentioned earlier, it's everybody's game. It's everybody's responsibility. So even if you are just, even if you're not a medical professional, no? If you are very interested and you know a lot of things about this, no? And you learn from somebody who knows better, no? We encourage that you disseminate this information. But for people who are in power, for people who are in authority, because when you talk as an authority, people will believe you. That is why we always have a problem if there are two doctors talking about different things and advocating for different things. Now, that's our dilemma. One would be advocating for vaccine acceptance, and the other one would be putting some doubts into it. No, that's our dilemma. That is why we would rather listen to somebody who is the head of a society or the head of an association, because there is a consensus of opinion and decision based on something scientific. So what we want to tell people and to teach people is how to access information that are matter of fact, that are scientific and are evidence-based. So DepEd is an authority, and DepEd has a pool of people with brains now that are easily, that can easily access to the information by the students, by letting students know about these things. And when students know, they can tell their mama, if their families do not listen to the radio or are not interested, no, even just during the conversation during dinner time. So we have to be very creative. We have to make a lot of strategies because we know, in fact, we lack in terms of resources. So in my case, I am not I'm not employed, no? So I don't have any mandate, but I work as somebody who is an advocate. And so I try to link, I try to collaborate because I know I can do something. But I don't speak out unless I am asked to. And I don't carry any decision or any information carrying an association. That's why I always make myself clear. This is my opinion, if it's my opinion. This is what I know, and then I cite my source if that has to be carrying something like an organization or an authority. So to make the very long explanation short, yes to DepEd doing something about this. No, ano pa yung isa ganing mention mo aside from DOH? Did you mention something else?
Commission on Higher Education, ma'am.
Okay, CHED and DepEd, of course. DEA, in fact, last February of last year, that was my last engagement as public health advocate before we had the lockdown, before COVID was here in Iloilo, and I was able to meet during the Div Mancom of the Department of Education, both for the private and public health group. I mean, public and private schools. Now the heads of the schools, they did not invite me. Do you know that? They did not invite me and my group. We told them that we are willing to share with them what we know, and they accommodated us. So that is what I mean by advocacy. No, you go beyond what is given. You do something even more difficult because you don't have the mandate. Sometimes you don't even have the authority. But when people listen to you because they know you have something to say, now that's how you get through them. Okay? So much more kung may authority ka, mas madali yon. Mas madali yon.
Thank you so much, Ma'am No, for answering all of the questions of our participants, and of course for improving our trust and confidence in the information that we have right now. Your discussion made the inoculation process more assuring for us. So allow me to read the certificate of appreciation. Certificate of Appreciation is given to Mrs. Lerma L. Paris, RMT MSPH, for her meritorious service and participation as speaker during the alternative classes of University of San Agustin Student Government, Nursing Student Council, Junior Philippine Pharmacists Association Apothecarian Council, Junior Association of Medical Laboratory Scientists and Nutrition Dietetics Council, entitled Istorya ng Bakuna, the medical perspective of vaccination and its importance in public health that leads to a successful event. Given this 11th day of April in the year 2021, signed Adelmar Javier Jr., USASG President, signed Sonny Ayla Sala, USASG Advisor. Again, Mom, thank you so much, and
Of
God
course.
bless.
Oh, welcome.
Of course, no, as pioneers in our society and as future healthcare workers, we must lead by example and
Yes.
spread the correct information.
Allow me last thing. One last thing.
Yes,
I-chat
ma'am.
ko na lang.
Yes,
Never
ma'am.
mind. Just kubadi.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I forgot. Ako mamangkot sa inyo. You consider this in your quiz.
Yes, ma'am. That is ma'am.
And if you cannot answer, you ask in the chat. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. God
Bye-bye.
bless.
I will be listening to the other speakers.
Okay. Now let's proceed to our third speaker for this afternoon. He is a physician scientist with over 10 years international experience in clinical research and development, regulatory and medical affairs and program management of vaccine discovery and development in Asia Pacific, Europe, Latin America, and Africa. He is a global medical director of the Vaccine Business Unit, a TED educator, and a digital health expert for the World Health Organization. He has developed influenza, tuberculosis, meningitis, and coronavirus, which have been translated into different languages and used by millions globally. He earned this bachelor's degree cum laude and medical doctor from University of the Philippines, Manila. He has a postgraduate degree in vaccinology and clinical development cum laude. Infectious diseases, London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, Health Economics, University of Aberdeen, Clinical Risk Management, University of Leeds, and Public Leadership from Harvard Kennedy School. He is a fellow of the Royal Society of Tropical Medicine and Hygiene, and a fellow of the Royal Society for Public Health, and a fellow for the Royal Society of Pharmacy. That's all. Welcome, Dr. Melvin Sanicas. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. Hear me?
Yes, sir. Audible.
I'm hearing a little bit of echo. Ayan. I think it's gone. Okay. My presentation will be shown right now. Right. Okay. Good. And then how will I be moving this one? Okay, I will just say next slide then. So good afternoon, everyone. First of all, thank you to the organizers for inviting me to be part of Istorya Bakuna. Just over a year ago, before the pandemic started, vaccines were not really considered something worthwhile to talk about. And people were, for the most part, vaguely familiar with vaccines. But since the end of 2020, COVID vaccines have been in the spotlight and have become an everyday conversation. And almost everyone now has some idea of the principles of vaccination, and that's good. But it has also made vaccines a topic of a lot of misinformation, a lot of disinformation, and it's always a challenge to talk about a topic popular vaccines but I will try my best to give you the most important tips in the next 30 minutes or so, because we need all of you to end the pandemic. All of us. We need all of us to explain to our friends, our families, why we need COVID vaccines if we want to end the pandemic. Next slide, please. So first of all, some disclosures. I am employed by Takeda, and I work as a technical consultant or a advisor for several groups and companies listed here. But I am not representing any of them today, and I am here in my personal capacity as a physician and scientist who has been working in the field of vaccinology and virology for over 10 years now. So next slide, please. I am still hearing echo. Can everyone please unmute?
Sorry for that, sir. We're having technical difficulties. We will fix it right now. Thank you.
Okay, so so first I want to start by saying that I have received several vaccines as a child and as an adult, and I'm very sure you all have received vaccines when you were young. So we are all living proofs of the safety and efficacy of vaccines, because we are here without polio, without diphtheria, without tetanus, because vaccines work. Next slide, please. This is smallpox. It is a disease that has been eradicated from the world in 1980. So we have not seen this disease for over 40 years now. And most probably everyone here has not seen smallpox. But the reason why we not see smallpox now is because of vaccines. Next slide, please. So if you look at the slides, you will see here that before 1980s, there were a lot of cases of smallpox. And because smallpox vaccination campaign started decades ago, it was eradicated. It was vaccination that eradicated it, not exercise, not healthy diet, not being clean. And why? Because in these years, decades before they started the campaign, we had all of these things. Next slide, please. So you can clearly see in this slide that the global smallpox vaccination started decades before it was eradicated. And at the moment, smallpox is the only human infectious disease that we have defeated after vaccines came into the picture. Next slide, please. My talk for today will have four parts. Short parts. So first, how do we know vaccines are safe? How do we know COVID vaccines are safe? How do we know COVID vaccines are effective? And why do we need COVID vaccines? Next slide, please. So we know that vaccines are safe because vaccines are one of the most thoroughly tested medical products available in the world. Before a vaccine can be considered for approval, a vaccine manufacturer or the developer must show it is safe and effective through clinical trials, and assessment of the safety of a particular vaccine candidate starts even before clinical trials. Next slide, please. So in vaccine development, the first step is to identify a vaccine candidate. It is in this pre-clinical development stage, which determines a vaccine's ultimate safety profile. During this stage, the researchers will carefully select the antigen and the appropriate technologies, and both in vitro, so sa lab, sa petri dish, and in vivo tests will be performed. The information collected from these studies will be vital to proceed with the clinical trials in humans. Next slide, please. When you say clinical stage, it's when you give the vaccine candidate to people. That's why it's clinical. And we have phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and you've heard about all of these since last year. But phase 1 really is the first attempt to assess the candidate vaccines in humans, and it involves a small group of people. And the candidate vaccine here will be tested for the first time in humans to evaluate the safety, to determine what is the dose that should be given that is safe, and the dose that provides optimal immune response. And you will also be able to identify some side effects here. And if the vaccine is intended for children, researchers will first test in adults, because you cannot start giving vaccines to children. And then gradually you step down the age of the test subjects until they reach the target. That's what we are doing with COVID, right? We started with adults, and now we are doing it in adolescents. And then after we see that it's okay in adolescents, we can proceed to the younger population. And then the goal of phase 1 testing is really more of safety. That's the primary goal of the phase 1 study. And if the results from phase 1 studies are positive, the vaccine can move on to the next phase, which is the phase 2, where you give the vaccine candidate to more participants. And here you look at, again, the vaccine's safety, immunogenicity. You see whether it can really give a good immune response. And you also look at the different schedule of immunization. You give it, for example, today, and then 4 weeks after today, or 8 weeks after. And these things are studied in phase 2. And then once you have a positive result for your phase 2, then you can move on to phase 3. Phase 3 is very important, because it's only in phase 3 where you can really see whether the vaccine is going to work or not. In phase 3, you look at the vaccine efficacy, also safety. In all the trials, you always look at the safety of the vaccine. And here you give it to a significant large group of people, and specifically those you want to get the vaccine in the future. And then after that, you submit it to the regulatory authority for review and approval. But then safety assessment does not end there, because you have phase 4 studies where you look at the safety of the vaccine when you give it to more people, because when you give it to millions of people, you will see the more rare adverse events. And then you also look at the effectiveness of the vaccine. So the difference between efficacy and effectiveness is really because when you say efficacy, you talk about how the vaccine works in the phase 1, 2, 3, the phase 3 trials. When you talk about effectiveness, you talk about how the vaccine works in a real life situation. And then next slide, please. So the reason really why we were able to make the vaccine in a very short amount of time is that mainly one of the reasons is because we saved a lot of time in the design, exploratory, and the preclinical stage, because SARS-CoV-2 is not the first coronavirus. Scientists have been studying coronaviruses for over half a century now, because we have 4 other human coronaviruses that don't cause outbreaks, but they cause the common cold. Then we had SARS the first SARS in 2002, and then we had MERS, the Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, in 2012. So scientists had existing data on the structure, the genome, and the life cycle of coronaviruses. So we save a lot of time there. And also, the other thing that happened for COVID vaccine development is that instead of doing studies one after the other, so typically you do phase 1, you wait for the results, you publish, and then you apply for funding for phase 2. You do phase 2, you wait for the results, you publish, and then you apply for funding for phase 3. You do phase 3, wait for the results, and again, wait for everything before you can create your dossier to submit to the regulatory authority. And this did not happen with COVID. For COVID, the phase 1, 2, 3 trials were done in parallel to save time. And instead of waiting for everything to be finished before submission to the FDA, for example, what happened was that the developers were sending the data to the regulators as they became available. So after your phase 1, instead of waiting for publication, you submit it to the FDA. Same thing for phase 2 and same thing for phase 3. And that is the reason why we have the vaccines in less than a year. And also, one major reason was that before the phase 3 results even came out, the vaccine developers already started production. And so the risk here actually was more of financial, right? Because if the vaccines turned out to be ineffective or not able to really work, then all these doses that you've produced in advance will just be thrown out. So the risk there was not in the safety, but is more of the resources that you waste because you will probably throw the doses if they don't work. So next slide, please. How do we know COVID vaccines are safe? Next slide, please. Next. So as I've just mentioned, and also mentioned by Ma'am Lerma before and the previous speaker, all vaccines go through clinical trials to test safety and efficacy. And for the COVID-19 vaccine, the national regulatory authorities like the US FDA, our FDA, European Medicines Agency, they have set up rigorous standards for developers to meet before they started reviewing. The next. And we also have to remember that most of these vaccine approvals are approvals for emergency use. So it means that they have met safety and efficacy standards, even if, let's say, that the data is not complete. And the reason why emergency use is given is because we are in a pandemic. Next slide, please. And you've seen all these news about AstraZeneca, right? About the blood clots and other risks. And the reason why we see all of these things because we have systems in place to track them. Next slide, please. So we are doing continuous monitoring for problems and side effects. And that is the reason why even something as rare as the blood clots that we are seeing with AstraZeneca vaccine, we were able to see it because we have robust systems in place. Next slide, please. So how do we know COVID vaccines are effective? Again, because we have the phase 3 studies where we look at the efficacy of the vaccine. The efficacy studies for almost all of the vaccines that we have at the moment had over 10,000 participants, or 20 or 30, even 40,000. And that's a lot of number. You can really make a very good conclusion with a big sample size. So what happened was that some of the participants got the vaccine, some of the participants got placebo, and then you follow them up and see which ones got infected or which ones did not become infected, and which of the participants were hospitalized or died. And next slide, please. And this is really now effectiveness data from Israel. It's showing us that the cases in Israel are now down by 95% compared to January across all age groups, even if only the elderly and the 40 to 59 have received the vaccine. So the younger population, they have not received the vaccines yet, but you can see that cases in all these age groups are decreasing. And that is really now a sign of population immunity or herd immunity or community immunity. Next slide, please. Let's look at this video from Vox. This is just more than a minute, but this is really a good explanation of why we need to look at the efficacy of the vaccine against severe disease and death. Can you please play the video? Okay, so maybe I can just say something because there's no audio. Just play it, please.
Scenario is you don't get sick at all. The worst case is death. In between, there's being hospitalized, severe to moderate symptoms, or having no symptoms at all. In the absolute best circumstances, vaccines give you protection all the way to here. But realistically, that isn't the main objective of COVID-19 vaccines. The real purpose is to give your body enough protection to cover these possibilities. So if you do get an infection, it feels more like a cold than something you'd be hospitalized for. And this is one thing that every one of these COVID-19 vaccines do well. In all these trials, while some people in the placebo groups were hospitalized or even died from COVID-19, not one fully vaccinated person in any of these trials was hospitalized or died from COVID-19.
So I think it's very clear that when you talk about efficacy of the vaccine, you talk about two different spectrums, right? So one is efficacy against infection, and on the other hand, efficacy against death. And we are also busy talking about vaccine efficacy against infection, but what really is very important at the moment for us to end the pandemic is for a vaccine to protect us against serious disease, hospitalization, and death. Because imagine if a vaccine had been available in, let's say, January 2020 and used by everyone, and nobody died of COVID, we will not be in this situation at the moment. Next slide, please. So we need COVID vaccines because two things. It's for us, right? The COVID vaccine will help keep us from being infected. Some vaccines are better than the others from protection against infection, but all of the vaccines are very good at protecting against severe disease and death. And if you get infected, the vaccine will prevent you from getting complications as well. And also, we think about long COVID, right? There are other people who have been infected with COVID and that they have still some symptoms months after recovering. And we don't want these things as well. So if you think about it, the COVID vaccine protects you from infection. Some are better than the others, but it protects you from long COVID, and it also protects you from getting serious disease or from death. Next, please. And the other thing that we need to think about is the benefit for other people. So if you look at the illustration here for community A, for example, if there is just one case of an infected person, COVID can easily spread to other people because there are much more susceptible people in community A. But in community B, where many of the people have been immunized, the chances for COVID to spread is less because we have population immunity. Next slide, please. And that's the reason why when we think about vaccines, we should think about the benefit of the vaccine, not just for us, but for our family, our friends, and for the world, really. Because unless a big portion of the world's population has been infected and recovered or vaccinated, we will see outbreaks happening anywhere in the world. That's why the WHO and all the other health experts are always saying nobody is safe until everyone is safe. And that's something that we should think about when we talk about vaccines. Next slide, please. And so here, I wanted to show you that now there have been 134 million, over 134 million cases of COVID, and sadly, 2.9 million deaths. And if you think about, if you calculate, this is more or less 2.2% fatality rate. Next slide, please. And so if we talk about population immunity or community immunity or herd immunity, people say it's around 70% or 85% or 80%, but let's just say it's 70% for us to calculate easily. So 70% of the population of the world is 5.46 billion. And with a fatality rate of 2.2%, how many people are expected to die from this 5.46 billion? Next, please. It's actually a lot. It's around 120 million people. And I don't think we want that. That's a lot of deaths in our hands when we have an alternative that's safer, which is vaccination. Next slide, please. And I want to end my talk by saying that vaccines are some of the most incredible scientific achievements of our lifetime. And the COVID vaccines in particular are like the moon landing of our generation. They're the most important scientific innovation. And I think we as a global community have not absorbed the importance of this, the enormity of this scientific achievement. And it is really sad that instead of appreciating this, many people are demonizing vaccines. And many people are just spreading a lot of lies and misinformation about vaccines. The very thing that will help us in this pandemic. So I hope that you will be more active in promoting COVID vaccines in your own circle of friends, in your families, because people believe doctors and nurses and med techs and pharmacists, right? But people believe their families and friends even more. So because you are all gonna be medical scientific professionals in the future, or you're still students, but you are gonna be in that path, you will be very important in convincing your friends and families to get vaccinated. So thank you again, and I will be happy to answer your questions.
Thank you so much, Rino. So I do agree with your statements, Rino, that we have as teacher medical practitioner, have we need to be educated about this. We need to be part of the discourse with regards to this and be informed with regards to this matter, since it's in line with our work in the future. And it's really disturbing, sir, no, that there's a low level of acceptance in our society right now. And our country is being ravaged by this virus for over a year now. And now that vaccines are starting to become available, many people do not want to be vaccinated. And they need to understand, of course, and us as well, that that they need to understand that getting themselves vaccinated is their duty as citizens of this nation. And there are, of course, that people have led to believe that these vaccines are harmful. And of course, we need to appeal to them, and um, that they need to open their minds. They need to be open about this facts, no, because it's
Yeah,
scientific based.
agree. But I think Bea, that's an excellent summary, right, of what of my talk. I think as human beings, we're not very good in assessing risk and benefits. We are very bad at that. I mean, look at us, right? We always like to play lotto or buy sweepstakes or whatever when the chances of us winning is very, very low, and the chances of us getting infected by COVID is higher. But people are looking at it in a way that they think that the alternative for us to be out of this pandemic is, let's say, it's okay, right? Because we can reach herd immunity without vaccines. But really, we have to emphasize that we will reach population immunity, community immunity from COVID if 5.46 billion have been infected. And with this 5.46 billion infected, you will see 120 million people die. And that's not really ethically correct. And it's really wrong. So it's something that we need to emphasize when we talk to people, that it's not just about protecting us, but it's also really looking at others. Bawasan ng selfishness, I guess, because it's really, there's a pandemic of selfishness as well that's happening, even with masks, even with physical distancing. You know, people are always thinking about me, what's convenient for me, and I think that should be called out by us medical professionals.
So again, sir, thank you so much. No? So we will now accommodate 2 to 3 questions from our participants. Okay, we have a question from Mr. Roy Michael Trinidad.
Yes.
Okay,
so if one would be vaccinated with his or her first dose being Sinovac and the second be a different brand, okay, are the vaccines present? Okay, so short answer here is we have no data to show that mixing and matching vaccines work. But really, theoretically, as a vaccinologist, I can say that you can do this. It will be safe. What we don't know is, are they going to be effective? Is the effect going to be as good as giving 2 doses of the same brand? And there are studies being done at the moment in the UK using AstraZeneca. There's also a study being done combining AstraZeneca with Sputnik V vaccine, and we have to wait for that. But really, for me, as much as possible, get the second dose of the same vaccine. If it's really, really not possible, like wala talagang choice ever, di ba, na wala nang doses, then you can get another vaccine, but you also have to finish the 2 doses for that. Because if you're getting another vaccine at 2 doses and you get one of something else and one of something else, that's not really giving you optimal protection. You have to finish the 2 doses of the second vaccine that you're getting, unless it's the J&J vaccine, because the J&J vaccine is only 1 dose. I hope that's clear. So basically, I'm saying as much as possible, get the 2 doses of the same vaccine. Kung wala talagang choice, as in wala na talagang doses for the other, get another vaccine, but also finish the 2 doses for that.
Thank you so much, sir. No, and thank you for.
There's another question.
Okay.
Are there vaccines presently available and effective against the new COVID variants? This is another very good question. So we have been seeing a lot of reports, right, saying that this specific vaccine, ganito lang ang efficacy niya against variants, blah, blah, blah. We should look at it the other way, right? Kunyari ang J&J vaccine, you have 89% in the UK, but you have something like 60% in South Africa because of the South African variant that's there, the B1351. The good news here actually is it is still working. Of course, you expect a little bit of a decrease in the efficacy because the variant is different from the traditional D16G SARS-CoV-2, right? And also, other studies we hear, they're saying the neutralization test is really low. Maybe the antibodies doesn't work. But we have to remember that our immune system is not just antibodies. Our immune system is antibodies and T cells. So Maybe the antibodies are affected because of the variants, but the T cell is different, and the T cell will be there, and the T cell will still help us clear the infection. So we can look at this in a very gloomy and pessimistic way. Now, okay, we will all be dying because of this variants, but actually the reality is not. We are still okay. But maybe ask me in 6 months or 12 months from now, maybe I will say something different, because things are developing really fast. But at the moment, we are okay. We should not be scared of these variants.
Thank you, sir, for your discussion with regards to rebuilding public trust. Are vaccines really safe and effective? So the certificate reads, Certificate of Appreciation is given to Dr. Melvin Jalando-on Sanicas for his meritorious service and participation as speaker during the alternative classes in University of San Agustin Student Government, Nursing Student Council, Junior Philippine Pharmacists Association, Apothecarian Council, Junior Association of Medical Laboratory Scientists, and Nutrition Dietetics Council entitled Istorya sa Bakuna, the Medical Perspective of Vaccination and its Importance in Public Health that leads to a successful event. Given this 11th day of April in the year 2021. Signed, Adelmar Javier Jr., USASG President. Signed, Sonny A. Lasala, USASG Advisor. Again, sir, thank you so much for being with us this afternoon and for sharing your time with us. God bless.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.
And now, we'll be asking you 3 questions through Google Forms, so watch out for that. The first to answer these questions will receive a prize exclusively from USA Student Government. Okay, question number 1 and 2 is now up, so you may now answer those questions. So we have for this afternoon's alternative class, we have our last speaker for this afternoon. So I know some of you may bored in your respective homes, but guys, kalma na lang, lapit na lang matapos. Okay, question number 3 is now up. You may now answer it. Again, the winners will be announced after the program, so watch out for that. So now allow me to present our last speaker for this event. She's currently working in a Clan Cooperative Mission Hospital since September 2017 to the present. She was a part-time college instructor in a Clan Catholic College, part-time instructor for Bachelor of Science in Nutrition and Dietetics program, the College of Health and Allied Medical Profession, part-time nutritionist dietitian of Altum Resources Incorporated from 2018 until March 2020. And she's also a volunteer teacher in the Wheeling University Center and volunteer in medical mission at San Juan Elementary School. Let's all welcome our last guest speaker for this afternoon, Miss Althea Melgarero. So we're having some technical difficulties. So bear with us. Okay.
A pleasant day to everyone. My name is Althea Jean T. Melgarejo, and I am a licensed nutritionist dietitian. I am grateful to be invited to be part in your celebration for your university week with the theme Istorya sang Bakuna, the medical perspective of vaccination and its importance to public health. And in line with this, I will be discussing about mental health and nutrition. So here are my topics or the content of my discussion. First, I will be discussing a short discussion about what is mental health all about. Second, the role of nutrition. And third, how can we achieve a healthy mind and body? So for our first topic, what is mental health all about? But before we define mental health, let us first define the word health. We have a very broad understanding about health, but little did we know that the term do not only refer to the physical aspect of our well-being. So here, according to WHO or World Health Organization, health is defined as a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. In addition, it is a resource for everyday life, not the objective of living. Health is a positive concept emphasizing social and personal resources as well as physical capacities. So, health is a resource, meaning having a good state of health will help us to achieve what we want to achieve in our everyday life. Ito yung magandang kondisyon ng katawan natin na hindi lamang tumutukoy sa physical, kung saan wala tayong nararamdamang sakit, kundi pati na rin sa kondisyon ng ating isipan at kung paano tayo makikitungo o makikibagay sa ibang tao. Yan yung kabuuang kahulugan ng salitang health. Now, meron tayong iba't ibang klase ng kalusugan o health na laging tinutukoy ng mga medical experts. At lagi o paulit-ulit yung nababanggit ang physical at mental health. Bakit nga ba lagi itong dalawa? This is because your physical health.
Okay, so please wait for a moment since we're having some technical difficulties right now. So kamusta ka muna, no? And I hope nakakaon ka mo. And I hope that you're all excited for our university week tomorrow na. So
able to
So now let's go back to the question. Thank you.
klase ng kalusugan o health na laging tinutukoy ng mga medical experts. At lagi o paulit-ulit yung nababanggit ang physical at mental health. Bakit nga ba lagi itong dalawa? This is because your physical health pertains to the of our bodily functions and how we carried out in our daily tasks. While yung mental health naman, ito nagdedetermine on how we can able to handle our emotions as well as our relationships with other people in order to do our tasks. So, ano naman yung relationship ng spiritual, emotional, and financial health? The three actually have correlations with the first two types of health. Just take for example, during this pandemic, some of your family members lose their jobs, which made the whole family financially unstable, which then resulted to emotional stress. And then, this could lead to overthinking ni nanay and ni tatay na kung saan na makakakuha ng pera panggasto sa araw-araw. Hindi na makakakain yung pamilya dahil wala na tayong pagkukuhaan ng pera. So, this all refers to your emotional and financial health, as well as your spiritual health. Kasi minsan, when meron tayong naiisip ng mga problema, hindi na natin naiisip na ito pala ay challenges lamang na binigay sa atin ng Diyos. And then, that affects then our physical and mental health also. So, let us first discuss mental health naman. Kung ano ba talaga yung ibig sabihin ng mental health at kung bakit ito importante, katulad ng pagiging importante ng physical health. So, mental health refers to a person's emotional, social, and psychological well-being. Mental health is as important as physical health as part of a full active lifestyle. So when you say mental health, it is a concern, especially when this pandemic started. Dahil lahat tayo worried. May ilan na wala ng trabaho. May ilan na lugi ang negosyo. At may ilan naman nahirapan mag-adjust because of the new normal. So, having good mental health is important because if we have stable health mentally, then we will have a strong will and we will always think positively. And then we will realize na everything is possible, everything has a solution. And then we in ourselves can be much more flexible in order to adjust to the new normal. So that is mental health. Mental health is all about our emotions and our psychological well-being, how we perceive things. Okay? So, how then on our next slide, a good mental health is not only categorized by the absence of depression, anxiety, or another disorder. It also depends on a person's ability to first enjoy life. You will be able to have a good mental health or a good way of thinking kung na-enjoy mo yung araw-araw or na-enjoy mo yung buhay mismo. There are times kasi na we woke up on the wrong side of the bed. But, hindi ako naniniwala sa kasilbihang ito. Kasi tayo, we have the ability to control our emotions as well as to stabilize it. Hindi naman lahat ng emotion na control, pero merong ilan. Okay? Bakit ba tayo laging nagpapadala sa mga negative vibes kung pwede naman nating gawing positive and happy yung buong araw natin? Bakit tayo magpapaapekto sa paligid na purong masamang balita ang laging dala kung pwede naman tayong mag-focus sa ibang bagay na dapat kailangang bigyan ng solusyon? Second, good mentality exists when the person can be able to bounce back after difficult experiences and adapt to adversity. So this refers to the ability of a person in his adaptability and flexibility in difficult situations. And we Filipinos are very much more expert on this. Because in every difficulties na na-face natin, lagi tayong may solusyon. Take for example, at times of lockdown. Diba, merong mga negosyo na nagsara. Pero, merong mga negosyo na hindi totally na nalugi kahit nagsara sila. This is because they took advantage of technology. They take time, they think, and find a solution sa problem na yan. Kung paano sila magkakaroon ng income kahit nakasara yung kanilang establishment physically. Okay? And they took social media as their medium of selling, which naging malaking tulong para sa kanila. So, that is an example of good mental thinking. Next, balance different elements of life, such as family and finances. So, dito tumutukoy ng time and financial management. Okay, hindi ka naman magkakaroon ng problema kung alam mo kung paano ma-handle yung oras mo between your modules, kapag ikaw ay estudyante, between your work, kapag ikaw naman ay nagtatrabaho, and between with your family. Okay? At hindi ka naman magkakaproblema sa pera kung alam mo kung paano ito panghahawakan at gagastusin. So that is the meaning of balance. Next, the feeling of safety and security. So, magiging mapayapa or peaceful ang ating isipan, especially this time na meron na tayong vaccines. And we need to believe na these vaccines will solve this problem or itong problem na ito na kinakaharap natin. And with that, we can be able to think peacefully. And lastly, achieve their full potential. Okay? So, ang full potential na tinutukoy dito, meaning how you develop yourself to be someone worthwhile or someone worthful every day. So, that is a good way of thinking on how you can develop your person to become a better one. Okay? So next, here, physical and mental health have strong connections. It is important to approach health as a whole rather than as a series of separate factors. All types of health, we need to remember, are linked, and people should aim for the overall well-being and balance as the keys to good health. Kaya lagi nating tatandaan na kapag hindi tayo healthy mentally, then it can be reflected on the state of our body physically. Take for example, or like for example, nagkaroon kayo ng away ng close friends mo, which resulted to a major misunderstanding. And this misunderstanding causes you to not sleep and not eat properly. So, ano yung magiging result? Siyempre, ikaw naman na nagpo-problema dahil nga nagkaroon kayo ng conflict with your friend or with your friends, nakikitaan ka na ng eye bags, nagbawas ka ng timbang, nagkatagyawat ka pa. So, that is a simple example lang kung paano nagkaroon ng connection yung problem mo, which you are always thinking, and then nakikita na sa iyong physical appearance. Okay? So, let's proceed to the role of nutrition. Ano naman yung importante or yung necessity ng nutrition pagdating sa mental health as well as in our physical health? So, nutrition, it is said that proper nutrition helps in preserving health, which is actually true. Okay? The best way to maintain health is to preserve it through a healthful lifestyle rather than waiting until sickness or infirmity to address health problems. People use the name wellness to describe this continuous state of enhanced well-being. And we need to remember that prevention is better than cure. That is why it is better na mas pahalagahan natin ang ating kalusugan as early as possible bago pa tayo madapuan ng mga sakit. Especially ngayon na yung simpleng ubo, sipon at lagnat, naku, COVID na agad, symptoms agad ng COVID. So, kailangan maiwasan na natin yan. And according to WHO, wellness is the optimal state of an individual and group. And there are two focal concerns: the realization of the fullest potential of an individual physically, psychologically, socially, spiritually, and economically, and the fulfillment of one's role and expectation in the family, community, place of worship, and other settings. In short, wellness, this is yung ideal na kalagayan ng pangangatawan ng isang tao na kung saan you can achieve your highest potential without any difficulties dahil alam mo sa sarili mo na kaya mo. You do not feel discomfort at all dahil alam mo wala kang problema na iisipin, wala kang problema or karamdaman na dinadaing. You are confident because you feel na you can put it off. Okay? So that is the meaning of wellness. In here, wellness promotes active awareness of the participating in measures that preserve health, both as an individual and in the community. Maintaining wellness and optimal health is a lifelong daily commitment. We need to take note here that both wellness and optimal health is a lifelong and daily commitment. Meaning, hindi lang ito natatapos sa isang araw na masurvive lang natin yung buong araw natin. In order to achieve wellness, we have and we need to practice it every day. We need to commit to it, and we have to be 100% ready in order to achieve wellness itself. We have here the term peak health. And the definition of peak health is highly individual. Ibig sabihin, iba-iba kada tao. As there are steps a person may take in order to get there. Every person has a different health goals and a variety of ways to achieve them. It may not be possible to avoid disease altogether. However, a person should do as much as they can to develop resilience and prepare and mind to deal with illnesses as they arise. Meron tayong kanya-kanyang paraan, ang bawat isa sa atin, kung paano natin mapapanatiling nasa malusog at mabuting kalagayan ang ating pangangatawan. And all of it depends on what goal or goals do we have in order to achieve it. And these goals may only be your physical goal or for your physical health only, your mental health only, or for both. And still, the decision in order to attain peak health depends on one individual, on each of you. So, how can we able to achieve this what we call wellness, what we call peak health? Or how can we achieve both healthy mind and body? So we will be discussing this in our third topic. And we need to remember that a healthy body and a healthy mind resulted to a happy life. Thus, kailangan natin i-work out kung paano ba magkakaroon ng healthy body and mind para maging happy ang life. So let me introduce to you three major nutrients that our body needed in order to perform its overall functions. And these nutrients are necessary, particularly in our body physically, as well as in our mind. So first here we have complex carbohydrates. We all know na ang carbs or yung complex carbs natin, namely our rice and root crops, are a good source of energy. Kailangan natin ito sa ating katawan in order to perform all the activities that we need to perform in our everyday life. It is preferable to consume complex carbohydrates rather than your simple carbohydrates dahil yung complex carbohydrates, sa complex carbohydrate, mas napapatagalan or matagal tayong makaramdam ng gutom. And aside from that, merong dietary fiber, yung complex carbohydrates natin, which aids in our digestive system. And at the same time, these fiber are helpful when you are also trying to lose weight. So, complex carbs is a big yes para sa ating diet. Another, meron naman tayo ditong lean proteins. Lean proteins such as your fish, your meat, your eggs, as well as your nuts and seeds are necessary because this allows your body to think and react quickly. Protein main function is to help and repair your tissue and your muscle. Especially kapag masyado tayong na-overwork dahil physically heavy yung line of work ninyo, then you need protein to do its function. Also, protein is important dahil pagdating sa growth development, ito yung tumutulong para mas lalo pang mapadevelop yung physical aspects, especially sa mga kabataan natin na nangangailangan pa ng ganitong klaseng nutrients para sa kanilang growth. And lastly, we have here our fatty acids or our fats. So, fatty acids or good fats are important dahil hindi lamang sila another source of energy, pareho ng carbohydrates, but they can also help in absorption ng mga fat-soluble nutrients natin kagaya ng vitamin A, D, E, and K. Importante rin ang omega-3 fatty acids na nakukuha natin sa ating mga fishes and legumes and seeds dahil ito ay nakakatulong especially sa ating brain dahil meron itong anti-inflammatory and antibody property which is necessary para mapabagal ang deterioration ng ating mga brain cells. Okay? So those are the 3 essential nutrients that can help us in order to achieve and attain both healthy mind and body. So, ano naman yung mga pagkain aside from your carbs, from your protein, and from your fats, ano yung mga specific na pagkain na makakatulong maka-improve or ma-improve ang ating mental health or yung ating mood? So, here we have fish oil. So, yung fish oil natin is a good source of omega-3 na nasabi ko na nga kanina, it has a antibodies and anti-inflammatory properties. Second, we have your berries and yogurts. Yung berries and yogurts, meron din silang antioxidant property and other necessary nutrients kagaya ng vitamins and minerals na makakatulong para makalift up ng inyong mood. Meron din tayong whole grains and walnut. So these are another source of your omega-3 fatty acid as well as it has an antioxidant property. And lastly, your leafy greens as well as your beans, as they are a good source of vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants. So those are the 7 foods or 7 types of foods that can help in improving mental health. Pero paalala lamang po, you are not restricted to eat your comfort foods katulad ng ating mga chocolate, ng ating cakes, or ng candies, at mga chips natin, pero dapat lagi nating tatandaan that we need to watch for how much or for the amount of how much we can eat these type of foods. Kasi there are no goods or bad foods. Ito po yung lagi namin sinasabi. There are no good or bad foods, only bad diet. Sa madaling salita, ang pagkain ng hindi balanse at hindi masustansyang mga pagkain ang siyang maaaring maging dahilan para magkaroon tayo ng tinatawag na lifestyle diseases katulad ng diabetes, hypertension, at iba pa. Kaya kung maaari, tayong lamang po ay mag-obserba sa tamang pagkain natin ng mga masusustansya at balanseng pagkain. So I also prepared here some steps that can help you and us attain wellness. So first step, eating a balanced, nutritious diet from as many sources or many natural sources as possible. Dahil nakalagay po sa ating Filipino Kumain-Ments number 1 na kailangan natin kumain ng iba't ibang klaseng pagkain araw-araw, this is because there is no single food that can contain all the necessary nutrients which our body needed. That is why we need a variety of foods. Number 2, engaging in at least 1 hour and 30 minutes of physical activity. Having an active lifestyle helps you to distress kasi nakakatulong ito para ma-divert ang focus mo from some of your problems or worries, and this also help you to rethink things. Physical activities aids in releasing hormones which can provide an excellent environment for growth or brain cells, for the growth of our brain cells. At ang yung physical activities na ito ay hindi lamang limitado sa pag-ehersisyo. But at the same time, you can do activities with other people, especially with your friends and family, to make it much more enjoyable. Next, learning to manage stress. So stress management is also important. And kasama na dito on how you manage your time in work or in school or at home. And as well as to manage your emotions on different situations. When you feel depressed about your job or about your day, then take time to relax. Deserve nyo naman din mag-relax, okay? So take time to relax yourself, meditate, do yoga, spend time with your family and friends. And you may ask them for their suggestions. Kasi minsan, we can get the best advice that we need from them. Okay? So, you need to manage stress in order to attain wellness. Next, engaging in activities that provide purpose. And these activities refers to those events which you can find fulfillment. The one that you can say na
Hi everyone. Please bear with us since we're having some technical difficulties again, no? Since the power is back. Thank God. So we're down to the last 5 minutes discussion of our speakers. So let's just wait for our technical team. Okay. Again,
self as well as with other people. And lastly, this is the last step, defining a value system and putting it into action. So, in here, you need to think what value, what virtue or attitude yung gusto pandemic, we began to appreciate patience. Patience sa mga folks at or magulang natin sa loob ng bahay kasi nga 'di ba modular na tayo, homeschool, kumbaga. Dahil marami silang tanong, si nanay at si tatay maraming tanong sa akin, maraming puna sa akin, especially sa mga galaw ko sa loob ng bahay. Kasi nga, nasanay tayo na lagi tayong gala at labas ng bahay. Lagi na lang cellphone yung hawak natin, hindi na natin sila nakakausap. Second, patience kina ma'am and sir during online class. Dahil need din naman nila or namin mag-adjust, especially sa new technology or new educational system in order to provide a quality service and education sa inyo. And lastly, patience in believing for this pandemic to end. So, those are some of the steps in which can help you in achieving both healthy mind and healthy body. You need to remember in order to achieve both healthy mind and body, you need to think positively, You need a balanced and nutritious diet. And you need to interact with others more. Okay? Ma'am, paano ako distancing? That is why nga we can inaadikan ng laptop. You can connect using them as your new medium or as your medium of connecting with them. Okay? So in conclusion, a healthy mind and body depends on how an individual will manage his health in accordance to the goal of his life. If one goal is to achieve success in the future, then he or she must start in taking care of his or herself, and by putting one's body into good condition, will one achieve the result he or she wishes for. And that would be all for my discussion about mental health and nutrition. And once again, I would like to thank everyone for bearing with me during this whole discussion. Once again, I thank you very much to the University of San Agustin as well as to the staffs and personnel behind in inviting me. So stay safe and God bless to everyone. Thank you very much.
Okay, no, to sum it up, our speaker for last speaker for this afternoon tackled about the fact that immunity can weaken over time and be strengthened with vaccination. So even if a person has contracted and recovered from COVID-19, their immunity can be boosted by a vaccine and of course with a healthy lifestyle. Since sadly our guest speaker can't be with us this afternoon, may I present the certificate of appreciation to Miss Althea Jean Melgajero, um, for her meritorious service and participation as speaker during the alternative classes of University of San Agustin Student Government, Nursing Student Council, Junior Philippine Pharmacists Association, Apothecarian Council, Junior Association of Medical Laboratory Sciences and Nutrition and Dietetics Councils entitled Istorya ng Bakuna, the medical perspective of vaccination and its importance in public health that leads to a successful event. Given this 11th day of April in the year 2021. Signed, Adelmar Javier Jr., USASG President. Signed, Sonny A. Lasala, USASG Advisor. Now we will pose the last series questions for our games. And again, we will announce the winners after the program. So let's just wait for a while. And please be reminded as well no, that we'll have a photo op after the program. Ano? And please don't forget to fill up the evaluation form after this alternative class. Thank you so much. Okay, the question number 1 for the last speaker's discussion is now posted on the comment section, on the chat box, I mean. Please do check it out for a chance to win surprising prizes from the USA Student Government. Question 2 is now posted as well. And the last question for our alternative class this afternoon. Again, please be reminded that after the program, we will have a photo op. So please be ready with your cameras Okay. So again, there you have it, Agustinians. We hope that you all have learned something from our discussion today and from our speakers regarding the medical perspective of vaccination and its importance, of course, in the public health. And once again, this is your host, Bea Janini Yupan, Vice President Internal of the USA Student Government for Istorya, Bakuna, alternative class of the USA Student Government in partnership with the College of Health and Allied Medical Profession. Thank you for watching. Again, please open your cameras, participants, for official photo op. Hello guys, good afternoon. So while waiting